In 1876, the most popular drink in America wasn't Coca-Cola. It was root beer, and not the synthetic caramel-colored version you buy at the supermarket today. This was real root beer. It was made from a tree that grows wild in 31 states right now, a root that indigenous peoples used for over 3,000 years to heal the body and refresh the spirit. One flavor so distinctly American that it defined an entire century of soda fountains, candy shops, and childhood memories. Then, in 1960, the FDA banned it. The tree is called Sassafras albidum. If you live in the eastern United States, you can walk past it on almost any hiking trail from Maine to Florida. It's famous for its three distinct leaf shapes: a simple oval, a mitten with a thumb, and a three-lobed ghost. If you scratch the bark or crush a leaf, the smell is unmistakable. It smells exactly like root beer, because root beer was named after the root, not the other way around. For centuries, Native American tribes, the Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Choctaw, revered sassafras. They used it to treat everything from skin sores to fevers. It was a blood purifier, a spring tonic meant to wake the body up after a long winter. When European explorers arrived, they were obsessed. They saw indigenous people living long, healthy lives and credited the ajú tree. By the 1600s, sassafras was the second largest export from the American colonies to Europe, second only to tobacco. People in London were paying a fortune for sassafras tea, believing it was a miracle cure for the plague and syphilis. As America grew, so did the sassafras industry. In the 1800s, a pharmacist named Charles Hires tasted a traditional root tea while on his honeymoon. He spent years refining the recipe, eventually debuting Hires root beer at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exposition. It was a sensation. It was marketed as the temperance drink, a healthy, medicinal alternative to alcohol. For nearly 100 years, if you drank a root beer, you were consuming the essential oil of the sassafras root. But Hires wasn't the only one. By the early 1900s, sassafras had become the foundation of an entire industry. During Prohibition, root beer sales exploded, with parlors replacing speakeasies as family gathering spots. Brands like A&W and Barks became household names, and by the 1950s, root beer was a cultural titan. Children grew up with the taste of sassafras on their tongues. It was as American as apple pie, more American actually, because sassafras was native to this soil in a way wheat and apples never were. So why did it vanish? Why does every bottle of root beer today contain a label that says artificial flavor or sassafras extract saffrole-free? In 1960, the FDA officially banned saffrole, the primary component of sassafras oil, declaring it a potent carcinogen. They based this decision on a single study where rats were fed massive, concentrated doses of saffrole every single day for months. To give you an idea of the scale, for a human to consume the equivalent amount of saffrole used to give those rats liver tumors, you would have to drink between 15,000 and 20,000 bottles of old-fashioned root beer every single day. This wasn't a study about normal human consumption. It was a study about the LD50, the lethal dose. Yet, the FDA used it to wipe sassafras off the map. But here is where the story gets dark. This wasn't just about safety. It was about timing. By 1960, the flavoring industry was booming. Synthetic replacements were being patented. A $45 billion industry was rising, and they didn't want to rely on wild harvested roots that couldn't be controlled or patented. They needed a reason to switch to lab-created chemicals. The ban happened almost overnight. root beer manufacturers were given a choice: reformulate with artificial flavors or go out of business. Most chose to survive. They replaced sassafras with a cocktail of synthetic compounds, methyl salicylate, vanillin, and dozens of other chemicals designed to mimic the complexity of the real root. But it was never the same. Ask anyone who remembers pre-1960 root beer, and they'll tell you the difference. The modern version is flat, one-dimensional. The original had depth, earthy, spicy, medicinal notes that you can't replicate in a lab. Let's look at the science the FDA won't talk about. Safrole is indeed a weak carcinogen in rats, but humans process safrole differently than rodents. Research since the 1960s has shown that human livers possess enzymes that neutralize safrole much more efficiently than rats. Furthermore, sassafras was never consumed as an isolated chemical. It was consumed as a whole plant extract. Many plants we eat every day contain natural carcinogens. Black pepper contains safrole. Nutmeg and star anise contain safrole. Basil contains estragol, a chemical almost identical to safrole. Yet, the FDA hasn't banned pesto or pepper steak. Consider that the FDA approved aspartame, saccharin, and numerous artificial colors that have been linked to behavioral issues in children. These substances have no traditional use, no evolutionary relationship with human biology, yet they're generally recognized as safe, while sassafras is prohibited. But the FDA didn't stop at banning sassafras in commercial products. They went further. They declared that sassafras bark and root oil containing safrole were not generally recognized as safe for any use. This effectively criminalized traditional herbalism practices that had existed for millennia. Meanwhile, they allowed thousands of synthetic food additives to flood the market with minimal long-term testing. Compounds that had never existed in nature, that the human body had no evolutionary relationship with, were rubber-stamped as safe. They replaced a medicinal root with high fructose corn syrup and red 40. They took a drink that was a tonic and turned it into liquid candy. This is a recurring pattern throughout American history. When a plant provides sovereignty, when it allows people to heal themselves or feed themselves for free, it becomes a target. Sassafras was more than a flavor. It was an antiseptic, an anti-inflammatory, and a diuretic. Indigenous healers understood it as part of a complete medicinal system. The root was boiled, steeped, sometimes fermented. Combined with other plants in careful proportions, it addressed everything from spring fever to chronic inflammation. By labeling it dangerous, the system didn't just protect us from a statistically impossible risk, it severed our connection to this knowledge. The traditional knowledge holders, the ones who understood these preparations, were largely silenced by the ban. Their expertise was dismissed as anecdotal, even when it represented centuries of careful observation. These practices recognized something modern pharmaceutical science often ignores. Whole plants contain hundreds of compounds that work together. When you isolate one chemical and feed it to rats at toxic levels, you're not studying the plant anymore. You're studying a weapon you created from the plant. Today we are told that real root beer comes from a factory. We are told that the forest is a place of weeds and toxins. But the sassafras tree is still there. It hasn't changed. It still grows in the ditches, waiting for anyone who remembers how to dig. There is a movement today of foragers and herbalists who are reclaiming the root. They understand that dosage makes the poison, and that a cup of sassafras tea has less carcinogenic potential than a single charbroiled hamburger. These modern practitioners often operate in a legal gray area. While it is not illegal to dig sassafras roots for personal use, selling products containing saffrole remains prohibited. So they share knowledge instead of products. They teach people how to identify the tree, how to harvest sustainably, how to prepare the root properly. Some herbalists point out the irony. You can legally buy tobacco and alcohol, both proven killers responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths annually. But you cannot legally buy a root that in centuries of traditional use has no documented cases of causing cancer in humans. Follow the money, and the sassafras ban makes perfect sense. The global flavor and fragrance industry was beginning its exponential growth. Companies like International Flavors and Fragrances and Givaudan were developing synthetic compounds that could be standardized, patented, and sold at massive markups. Sassafras represented a fundamental problem for this business model. It was a wild crop, impossible to monopolize. Its flavor varied slightly from tree to tree, from region to region, from season to season. You could not standardize it the way corporations demand. You could not patent a tree that had been growing for millions of years. And most dangerously for corporate interests, people could get it for free. The synthetic root beer flavor developed to replace sassafras could be produced in factories, controlled completely, and sold to every beverage company in the world. One chemical supplier could dominate the entire market in a way that was impossible when manufacturers were buying from hundreds of small-scale root diggers across Appalachia. Within a decade of the ban, the artificial flavor industry had completely captured the root beer market. Today, the root beer flavor you taste in A&W, Barks, or Mug is manufactured by a handful of chemical companies. The formula is proprietary, the ingredients are trade secrets, and the profit margins are enormous. Compare that to the old model: local harvesters digging roots, selling them to regional bottlers who would process them and distribute to nearby communities. It was decentralized, resilient, and kept wealth circulating in local economies. The ban didn't just change the flavor of root beer. It fundamentally restructured the economic model of an entire industry. Sassafras is not alone. It's one story among hundreds of plants that were once central to American life, but have been regulated, marginalized, or erased from public consciousness. Hemp, for instance, was required by law to be grown by colonial farmers. George Washington grew it at Mount Vernon. The Declaration of Independence was drafted on hemp paper. By 1937, it was banned, not because it was dangerous, but because synthetic fibers like nylon needed the market share. Raw milk, consumed safely by humans for 10,000 years, has been banned in many states. The stated reason is safety, but pasteurization also happens to benefit large dairy processors while making it nearly impossible for small farms to compete. The pattern repeats. Find something people can produce themselves, declare it dangerous, replace it with an industrial product that can be controlled and monetized. Sassafras was just one tree in a vast forest of sovereignty that's been systematically clear-cut. If you want to experience the true flavor of America, you don't look for it on a shelf. You look for it in the wild. Look for those distinctive mitten and ghost leaves we identified earlier. In the autumn, they turn a brilliant, fiery orange and red, making sassafras one of the most spectacular trees in the fall forest. When you find a mature tree, dig a small portion of the lateral root, never the main taproot. When you peel the bark, the scent will hit you like a time machine, a smell more complex, earthy, and spicy than any soda you've ever tasted. The traditional method is simple. Clean the roots thoroughly, removing any dirt. Chop them into small pieces. The bark contains the highest concentration of flavor. Simmer the root pieces in water for 20 to 30 minutes, but don't boil aggressively, as this can make the tea bitter. The liquid will turn a deep reddish brown, and your kitchen will smell like an old-time soda fountain. Strain out the root pieces. You can sweeten the tea with honey or sugar, add a touch of vanilla, or drink it straight to experience the pure, uncut flavor of what root beer was meant to be. This is how root beer was made before it became a standardized corporate product, as a craft, with regional variations and family recipes passed down through generations. Some traditionalists add other roots and barks to create more complex flavors. Sarsaparilla root for earthiness, birch bark for a winter green note, wild cherry bark for depth. Harvest responsibly. Take only lateral roots from mature trees in abundant areas, leaving the main taproot to ensure the tree continues to thrive. In Appalachia, where the tradition never completely died, some families still dig sassafras roots every spring. They'll make a strong tea, store it in the refrigerator, and drink it throughout the week as a tonic. They'll tell you it thins the blood, clears the sinuses, and shakes off the winter sluggishness. Can they prove those benefits in a double-blind study? No, but millennia of use suggests that if sassafras were truly dangerous at traditional doses, we would know. The human experiment has already been run across countless generations, and the results are clear. Sassafras, used responsibly, is not the threat we've been told it is. The sassafras story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about how we determine safety and who benefits from those determinations. The answer lies in who has power in the regulatory process. Pharmaceutical and chemical companies employ armies of lobbyists and fund massive amounts of research. They sit on advisory panels. They shuttle between industry positions and regulatory roles through the revolving door. This imbalance in power creates a regulatory system that consistently favors industrial products over traditional ones, patents over public domain knowledge, corporate profits over community sovereignty. Despite the ban, despite the erasure, the memory of real root beer persists. Old-timers remember it. They'll tell you the root beer of their childhood was different, stronger, more complex, almost medicinal. That unmistakable aroma of real root beer. That's what's been missing from every bottle since 1960. In certain circles, traditional sassafras root beer has become something of a legend. Homebrewers and craft beverage makers speak of it in hushed tones, like a lost recipe from a golden age. Some have tried to recreate it using saffrole-free sassafras extract, but they admit it's not quite right. The soul of the flavor is missing. In other countries, particularly in Southeast Asia where sassafras relatives grow, saffrole-containing plants are still used freely in traditional medicine and cooking. The American ban is viewed as peculiar, another example of Western regulatory overreach based on flawed science. We traded a medicinal forest for a patented laboratory. We traded sovereignty for a saffrole-free imitation. But as long as the sassafras grows, the truth is just a few inches beneath the soil. There's a growing movement to reclaim traditional plant knowledge more broadly. People are learning to identify wild edibles, to make medicines from local herbs, to reduce their dependence on industrial systems. Sassafras has become a symbol in this movement, a plant that represents both what we've lost and the possibility of remembering. The knowledge is being preserved and transmitted, passed from foragers to students, shared in workshops and online, kept alive in books and videos. The regulations can control commerce, but they can't control knowledge. They can't control what grows in the forest, and they can't control our decision to walk into that forest and dig. The sassafras stands as living proof that the most resilient systems aren't the ones we build. They're the ones we simply stop destroying. These plants don't ask for permission to grow, and they don't need a supply chain to provide. They offer a version of independence that is sitting right there in the dirt, waiting for anyone with the curiosity to look down and the willingness to reach out. The root beer you tasted as a child might not have been real, but the root is still there, growing wild and free, waiting for anyone brave enough to taste the truth. Every spring, the sassafras sends up new shoots. Every fall, it composts its leaves into the earth. It persists without permission, without approval from regulatory agencies, without corporate backing. It simply exists, as it has for millions of years, waiting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit the subscribe button and tap the bell. Like and share this video to help others see the abundance growing in their own backyards. Thanks for watching. Keep your eyes on the trail, and we'll see you in the next one. The question is, are you ready to remember?